Absolutely. Here is the expanded first segment, written as a conversational relationships, psychology speech with intellectual depth, and a strong transition into the larger message. There is a message that can look incredibly simple on your phone, almost too simple to take seriously. I miss you, 3 words, and yet, when a man sends them with genuine feeling behind them, they can reveal something much deeper than the sentence itself. Because I miss you is not really a statement about distance. It is a statement about impact. Think about that for a moment. A man can talk to you because he is bored. He can text you because he wants attention. He can message you because he is attracted to you, because it is convenient, because he wants something, or simply because he has nothing better to do at that particular moment. But I miss you introduces something different. It tells you that your absence has become noticeable inside his emotional world. And that distinction matters because attraction is often about what happens when you are present. Missing someone reveals what happens when they are not. When you're standing in front of him, you're part of his environment. He can see you, hear you, touch you, experience your energy. He can respond to what is happening in real time. But when you're gone, none of that exists. And if, in your absence, his mind still returns to you, that's where something psychologically interesting begins to happen. Because the human mind does not simply remember people randomly, we tend to return mentally to what has emotional significance. Think about the person you cannot stop thinking about after an incredible conversation. Think about the song that suddenly reminds you of someone. Think about how a familiar place can trigger a memory without you consciously deciding to remember it. Emotion creates mental accessibility. What matters to us becomes easier for the mind to retrieve. So when a man says, "I miss you," what he may be communicating is not merely, "I wish you were physically here." He may be communicating, "Your presence has become something I notice when it is gone." And that is a very different statement. Now, I want to be careful here because this is where people can make a dangerous mistake. They hear the words, "I miss you," and immediately turn them into a conclusion. He loves me. He's obsessed with me. He must want a relationship. Not necessarily. Words are information. They are not evidence by themselves. And this is one of the most important principles you can understand in relationships. Never judge the depth of someone's feelings by the intensity of their words alone. Judge it by the consistency between their words and their behavior. A man can say, "I miss you," at midnight and disappear for 3 days. A man can say, "I miss you," when he wants to see you, but make no effort to actually see you. A man can miss the attention you give him without truly valuing you as a person. That's why the phrase itself isn't the magic. The psychology behind the phrase is what matters, and even more importantly, what he does after saying it. Because genuine longing tends to create movement. If I genuinely miss someone, there is usually an impulse to reconnect. I want to hear their voice. I want to know how they're doing. I want to see them. I want to restore the connection. That doesn't mean someone has to become obsessive or constantly available. Healthy attraction still allows independence. A healthy man can miss you while respecting your space, but there is a difference between saying, "I miss you," and behaving as though your absence actually matters. The first is a sentence, the second is a pattern, and patterns are where you find the truth. This is also why sometimes the most revealing "I miss you" isn't sent after weeks of silence. It is sent after something meaningful happens. Maybe you had a conversation that stayed with him. Maybe you spent an evening together and he found himself thinking about it the next day. Maybe you had to leave earlier than expected. Maybe something reminded him of you, and suddenly he reaches for his phone. I miss you. That moment can be revealing because it shows that the connection has continued inside his mind after the interaction ended. You are no longer physically there, but psychologically, the relationship is still active, and this is one of the foundations of emotional attachment. We don't only bond through what happens between two people, we bond through what happens inside each person when the other person isn't there. That's why absence can be so psychologically revealing. When you're together, both of you can be carried by chemistry, excitement, novelty, and stimulation. But when you're apart, the question becomes, does the connection survive without the immediate reward? Does he still think about you? Does he still wonder how your day is going? Does he remember something you said? Does he send you something because it reminded him of you? Does he make plans to see you again? Does he create continuity? Because emotional investment is often about continuity. It's about carrying someone with you mentally, even when they are not physically present. And there's something philosophical about that. Real connection isn't simply measured by how strongly someone feels when you're standing in front of them. It's measured by whether the relationship continues to have meaning when there is no immediate gratification. That's the difference between being entertained by someone and being emotionally affected by them. Entertainment ends when the screen goes dark. Emotional significance doesn't, and that's why I Miss You can be so powerful when it comes from the right person at the right moment. He's essentially acknowledging that something about you has become part of his internal landscape, but here's where I want you to protect yourself. Do not make the mistake of trying to manufacture that feeling. Don't disappear for 5 days because you've heard that men chase what they can't have. Don't intentionally become cold because you want him to miss you. Don't play psychological games with someone's emotions. Because if you have to manipulate absence in order to create longing, you aren't creating genuine attachment. You're creating uncertainty, and uncertainty can feel like chemistry. That's one of the biggest traps in modern dating. Someone becomes inconsistent, and suddenly you think about them constantly. They disappear, and you become obsessed with getting their attention. They return, and you experience a rush of relief, and you mistake that emotional roller coaster for love. But healthy attachment feels different. You don't need to constantly wonder where you stand. You don't need to decode every message. You don't need to manufacture scarcity. A man who genuinely values your presence doesn't need to be psychologically manipulated into missing you. Your absence naturally registers because your presence means something. That's the standard. So if a man texts you, "I miss you," don't immediately ask, "What does this mean?" Ask a better question. What does he consistently do when he misses me? Does he reach out? Does he make plans? Does he follow through? Does he want to know you more deeply? Does he create space for you in his life? Does he remember what matters to you? Does he move the relationship forward rather than simply keeping the emotional conversation alive? Because the most powerful form of "I miss you" isn't actually a text. It's effort. It's him saying, "I want to see you," and then making it happen. It's him remembering your schedule. It's him checking in after something important happened in your life. It's him creating another opportunity for connection. It's him making your presence part of his reality rather than simply making you part of his notifications. And that distinction is everything. Because eventually, as we move deeper into this conversation, we're going to talk about two other phrases that can reveal even more about a man's emotional world. But before we get there, I want you to remember this. Don't fall in love with the sentence. Pay attention to the behavior that gives the sentence meaning. Because when a man truly misses you, he doesn't just tell you that your absence hurts. He finds a way to make your presence matter again. And that's when three simple words become more than a message on your screen. They become evidence of a connection that continues even when you're not there, building naturally from the idea of "I miss you." The next phrase goes even deeper, not because the words are automatically more romantic, but because they can reveal a greater level of emotional vulnerability. And this is where the conversation becomes even more interesting, because there is a difference between a man saying, "I miss you," and a man saying, "I need you." Now, before we go any further, let me make something very clear. When I say need, I don't mean emotional dependency. I don't mean that a healthy relationship requires you to become someone's therapist, their entire social life, their source of self-worth, or the person responsible for keeping them emotionally stable. That's not love. That's an unhealthy burden. What we're talking about is something much more subtle. We're talking about the moment when a man begins to recognize that your presence has become emotionally significant to the life he's building. And for many people, that is a surprisingly vulnerable realization, because "I want you" is easy to say. "I find you attractive. I enjoy being around you. I want to see you tonight." Those statements can all exist inside attraction. But "I need you" moves into another psychological territory. It suggests that something about the connection has moved from preference into significance. And significance changes the stakes. Think about the difference between saying, "I like this person," and realizing, "My life feels different when this person isn't in it." That's a much more profound realization, because now the person isn't simply providing pleasure. They're contributing meaning. And human beings are deeply motivated by meaning. We want people who make us feel understood. We want people with whom we can share experiences. We want someone whose presence gives emotional weight to the ordinary moments of life. The interesting thing is that this often develops gradually. A man doesn't necessarily wake up one morning and decide, "Today I will become emotionally attached to this woman." Instead, attachment can emerge through hundreds of small interactions. You tell him something about your childhood. He remembers it. You mention something you're worried about. He checks on you later. You have a difficult day. He notices the change in your voice. You share a dream. He asks about it weeks later. You laugh together about something completely insignificant, and suddenly what looked insignificant becomes part of the emotional architecture of the relationship. That's how people become important, not usually through one grand romantic gesture, but through accumulated meaning. And eventually, a man may realize that he doesn't simply enjoy having you around. He has begun to rely on the connection itself. He wants your perspective. He wants your presence. He wants to tell you things. He wants to hear what you think. He wants you beside him when something important happens. And this is where "I need you" can become meaningful, not because he cannot function without you, but because he has discovered that life is richer with you in it. That's a very different kind of need. It's not possession, it's participation. He isn't saying, "I need you because I am incomplete." He's saying, in effect, "I have built something meaningful with you, and I don't want to imagine my life without that connection. And there is a philosophical depth to that. Because mature love doesn't eliminate individuality, it expands it. You don't become less of yourself because you love someone deeply. Ideally, you become more fully yourself because you have someone with whom you can share the parts of yourself that previously had nowhere to go. That's why emotional intimacy is so powerful. It gives experiences somewhere to land. A success becomes something you want to tell them about. A disappointment becomes something you want to process with them. A funny moment becomes something you immediately think, she would love this. And notice what has happened. They have entered your internal dialogue. They're no longer simply someone you see. They're someone you carry with you. And that is one of the clearest signs that attachment is becoming real. But there is another important distinction here. You should never confuse a man's statement of need with a man's willingness to take responsibility. Someone can say, I need you, because they are lonely. Someone can say it because they want reassurance. Someone can say it because they fear losing access to you. Someone can even say it because they enjoy the emotional comfort you provide without actually wanting to build a committed relationship. That's why words must always be interpreted through behavior. Ask yourself, what does he do with the feeling? Does it make him more intentional? Does it make him more consistent? Does it make him more protective of the connection? Does it make him more willing to communicate? Does it make him more interested in your needs as well as his own? Because genuine emotional significance creates responsibility. When someone truly matters to you, you become more conscious of how your behavior affects them. You don't just ask, what do I want? You begin asking, what does this relationship require from me? That is a major psychological shift. And it's one of the differences between infatuation and mature attachment. Infatuation asks, how does this person make me feel? Mature attachment eventually asks, what can I contribute to this person's life? That's why I don't want you to be impressed simply because a man says something emotionally intense. Intensity is not the same as depth. Someone can tell you, you're the only woman I need, after knowing you for 2 weeks. It sounds romantic, but sometimes the most romantic thing isn't intensity, it's reliability. It's a man who slowly, consistently demonstrates that your presence matters. It's him showing up when he says he will. It's him making room for you. It's him respecting your boundaries. It's him being curious about your world. It's him allowing you to see his world. It's him not disappearing every time emotional intimacy becomes uncomfortable. Because real emotional investment is not just about how strongly someone feels. It's about what they're willing to do with those feelings. And this is where many women get confused. They see emotional vulnerability and assume commitment, but vulnerability is not automatically commitment. A man can be emotionally open with you and still be incapable of building a stable relationship. A man can tell you his deepest fears and still avoid responsibility. A man can say, I need you, and still fail to create security. So don't simply ask, does he feel something? Ask, what does he build because he feels it? That's the question that changes everything, because feelings are internal, relationships are external. And eventually, internal feelings have to become external behavior if they're going to create something real. Now, there is another fascinating aspect to this. When a man begins genuinely valuing a woman, he often doesn't just want access to her affection. He wants access to her mind. He wants to know what she thinks. He respects her perspective. He becomes interested in her experiences. He wants to understand how she sees the world. And that is important because physical attraction can make someone want your body. Emotional attachment makes someone want your world, your stories, your thoughts, your fears, your ambitions. Your strange little habits, the things that make you laugh, the things that make you angry, the things you don't immediately reveal to everyone else. That's where intimacy becomes much more profound. And ironically, this is why the strongest relationships don't usually feel like two people desperately completing each other. They feel like two whole people choosing to participate in each other's lives. He doesn't need you because he cannot stand alone. He needs the relationship because he has discovered that standing beside you gives his life a dimension he genuinely values. And you should want the same thing. You should never be looking for someone who needs you because they're incapable of functioning without you. Look for someone who chooses you because they could function without you, but they genuinely don't want to build their future without you. That is a much healthier kind of desire, and it brings us to the deepest lesson in all of this. When a man says, "I need you," don't become intoxicated by the idea that you've finally become indispensable. Your worth was never dependent on becoming indispensable to someone else. Instead, listen for something more meaningful. Is he saying, "I need you because you complete me"? Or is his behavior saying, "I value you, I respect you, and I want to build something with you"? Because the second one is where real love begins to take shape. And once you understand that, you stop chasing words and start observing character. You stop asking, "How intensely does he feel?" And you start asking, "How consistently does he show up?" That's the shift from fantasy to wisdom. Because the man who truly needs you won't make you responsible for his happiness. He'll make you part of the life he's intentionally building. And that is the kind of need worth being chosen for, absolutely. I'll keep the same conversational, psychologically grounded structure and carry the progression from asterisk asterisk, "I miss you," right arrow, "I need you," right arrow, "I love you," asterisk asterisk into the final segment. And now we arrive at the three words that almost everyone wants to hear. I love you. Three words that can make your heart race. Three words that can change the atmosphere of an entire relationship. Three words that people sometimes spend months, even years, waiting to hear. But here's where I want you to become more discerning, because "I love you" can be one of the most meaningful things a person ever says to you, and it can also be one of the most misunderstood. We have a tendency to treat the words "I love you" as though they are the conclusion of the story. He said it, therefore he loves me, therefore we're safe, therefore this relationship must be right. But psychologically, that's too simple, because love isn't simply a feeling you announce. Love is a pattern you participate in, and that distinction can save you from an enormous amount of heartbreak. When a man says, "I love you," the first thing you should ask isn't, "How do I feel hearing that?" Of course you're going to feel something. You're human. Those words carry enormous emotional weight. The better question is, what does his love look like when he's not saying it? Because anyone can say beautiful things in beautiful moments. The real test of love happens in ordinary moments, when he's tired, when he's frustrated, when you disagree, when you're not giving him exactly what he wants, when there is nothing romantic happening, when the excitement has settled, when he has to choose between convenience and consideration. That's where love becomes visible. Because attraction often asks, "How much do I want you?" Love eventually asks, "How well am I willing to treat you?" And those are completely different questions. A man can be intensely attracted to you and still be incapable of loving you well. He can miss you, he can desire you, he can tell you that you're beautiful, he can send you messages every morning and every night, he can even say, I love you. And yet, if his behavior repeatedly creates confusion, disrespect, instability, or emotional insecurity, then you have to look beyond the words, not because the words necessarily mean nothing, but because love without healthy behavior is incomplete. This is where I think we need to redefine what romantic love actually means. We've been taught to think of love as intensity, the butterflies, the obsession, the sleepless nights, the constant desire, the feeling that this person is the only person in the world. But intensity is not the highest form of love. Sometimes intensity is simply uncertainty. Sometimes the person who keeps you guessing becomes the person you think about most, and you mistake the amount of mental space they occupy for the depth of your connection. But healthy love doesn't necessarily make you think about someone every second. Healthy love can actually make your nervous system quieter, because you know where you stand. You know that if something goes wrong, you can talk about it. You know that disagreement doesn't automatically mean abandonment. You know that affection isn't something you have to earn every morning. There is a kind of peace that comes from being loved consistently, and that peace is often less glamorous than drama, but it is far more valuable. So when a man says, I love you, watch what happens afterward. Does he become more intentional? Does he become more curious about your inner world? Does he want to understand what makes you feel safe? Does he care about your boundaries? Does he respect your ambitions? Does he make room for your life instead of expecting you to abandon it? Does he communicate when something is wrong? Does he take responsibility when he hurts you? Does he apologize without turning the apology into an argument about why you shouldn't have been hurt? These things may not sound as romantic as flowers or late-night declarations, but they're often much more romantic, because love is not merely the ability to create beautiful moments. It's the willingness to protect the relationship during difficult ones, and this is where maturity changes everything. A less mature version of love says, I love you because you make me feel incredible. A more mature version says, I love you enough to care about how my behavior affects you. That's a profound difference, because the first statement is primarily about the self, the second includes the other person, and love, by definition, eventually requires us to move beyond ourselves. It asks us to become interested not only in what we receive from another human being, but in what our presence contributes to their life. That's why real love creates responsibility, not ownership. Responsibility. There's a huge difference. Ownership says, you belong to me. Love says, I have chosen you, and because I have chosen you, I will treat your heart with care. Ownership wants control. Love wants understanding. Ownership becomes threatened by independence. Love respects individuality. Ownership asks, how do I keep you? Love asks, how do we keep choosing each other? And that second question is the foundation of a healthy relationship, because commitment isn't simply a promise about the future. It's a series of choices made in the present. Every time he communicates instead of withdrawing, that's a choice. Every time he listens instead of dismissing you, that's a choice. Every time he keeps a promise, that's a choice. Every time he makes an effort when it's inconvenient, that's a choice. And over time, those choices create something far more powerful than a declaration. They create trust, and trust is what allows love to become emotionally safe. Now, there's another reason I love you can be so psychologically powerful. It represents vulnerability. When someone tells you they love you, they're exposing something. They're giving you information that can potentially be used against them. They're saying, in effect, you matter enough to me that losing you would hurt. That is vulnerable, and healthy vulnerability should be respected, but vulnerability is only valuable when it is accompanied by emotional responsibility. If a man says, I love you, and then uses that declaration to manipulate you, control you, excuse poor behavior, or pressure you into accepting things you don't want, That's not healthy vulnerability. That's emotional leverage, and you should never confuse the two. A beautiful phrase doesn't automatically make a beautiful relationship. You have to look at the emotional ecosystem surrounding the phrase. What happens when you say no? What happens when you need something? What happens when you disagree? What happens when you are successful? What happens when you need space? What happens when life becomes difficult? Because those moments reveal whether his love is about possessing the version of you that makes him comfortable or embracing the real human being you actually are. And you are allowed to be a real human being. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to have boundaries. You are allowed to have ambitions. You are allowed to disagree. You are allowed to change. The right person's love doesn't require you to become smaller so the relationship can survive. It creates enough space for both people to grow. And this is why I want you to stop looking for the man who simply says the most romantic words. Look for the man whose behavior makes those words believable. If he says, "I love you," and you consistently feel respected, heard, considered, and emotionally safe, the words become powerful. If he says, "I love you," but you consistently feel anxious, confused, dismissed, or afraid to express your needs, then the words should not override your experience. Your experience is information, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to believe the pattern instead of the promise, because promises describe the future, patterns reveal the present, and relationships are built in the present. That's the deeper lesson behind all three phrases: I miss you, I need you, I love you. The words become progressively deeper, but the principle remains the same. Don't become hypnotized by language. Look for congruence. Does what he says match what he does? Does what he promises match what he practices? Does the person he describes himself as match the person you experience? Because when words and actions align, something extraordinary happens. You no longer have to decode every message. You don't have to become a detective. You don't have to analyze punctuation. You don't have to wonder what a 3-word text means at 2 in the morning. You can simply observe. You can breathe. You can let someone's consistency answer the question for you. And perhaps that's the greatest form of romantic wisdom. Not learning how to make someone obsessed with you, not learning how to manipulate someone into chasing you, not learning how to manufacture jealousy or uncertainty, but learning how to recognize someone whose feelings naturally produce behavior that is worthy of your trust. Because you don't need a man who is merely crazy about you. You need a man whose love is healthy enough to build with you. A man who misses you, but respects your space. A man who needs your presence, but doesn't make you responsible for his identity. A man who loves you, but doesn't use love as an excuse to control you. That's the difference between being desired and being valued. And once you understand that difference, you stop asking, "How can I make him crazy about me?" You start asking the far more powerful question, "Is the way he loves me worthy of the woman I am becoming?" Because the right love won't require you to lose yourself to keep someone else. It will give you more reasons to become fully yourself, and that's when you know the words mean something, not when he says them beautifully, but when he lives them consistently. Don't measure love by the words that make your heart race. Measure it by the actions that allow your heart to rest.